Imagine growing up believing that you are incomplete unless you find a romantic partner. Imagine making major life decisions based on fear of being alone rather than what genuinely makes you happy. In our world, we think children should know that they are already complete individuals and that romantic relationships are optional, not necessary for a fulfilling life. So, what does our world really look like? So in our world, parents actively challenge the idea that everyone must eventually date, marry, or have a romantic partner. Children are taught that being single is normal and respectable, and success and happiness are not measured by relationships status, and romantic relationship remain available, but they are viewed as an option rather than a life goal. So, what are we going to prove in our speech? So, today we will prove that raising children to prefer being single creates more independent, emotionally better, and autonomous individuals. We will further explain in our argument. So, what they need to prove in this debate, which is their burden, is that encouraging children to pursue romantic relationship as a default uh, life goal creates better outcomes than uh, encouraging independence and self-sufficiency. So if they cannot prove that romantic relationships should be the uh, default aspirations, then this motion stands. So I will start with my argument. Before I start with my argument, I will start with uh, so as a result, in this debate, we believe that uh, we significantly believe that individual growth is the most important factor in our debate, and I will move on to my argument. So, better self-worth and independence, and also academic performances. Children should learn their values doesn't depend on having a romantic partner. Furthermore, when we have a short term for not dating somebody, they can use time to achieve their goals. For example, if they're in a college and if they're dating somebody, they might if they're dating, it might be interrupted while they are studying. But if when in our world after finishing college and finishing uh, there's achievements they, and when they're dating somebody it's more less interactive and it will going to there will be a higher quality in dating somebody. So we also believe that uh in short term for not dating somebody they can use time to achieve their academic goals. Also for example uh they can use their time to work on, for example, uh they can spend their time to use money, or they can spend their time to their individual goals and use their time and money and efforts to their academic achievements or etc. So moving on to my second argument, higher quality it is about higher quality relationship. People who are comfortable for being single enters a relationship for the right reasons. When society treats relationship as a necessity, many people enter them because they fear this relationship and fear loneliness. This one social validations, which means society will going to pressure people who is single, which means whenever they even though they don't want a relationship, they society since society is forcing them to make forcing them to date somebody, they might date someone who don't really like, or who what their true love, which means eventually their relationship will be uh won't be good because as I mentioned, they might not it's not going to be a true love, or uh they might not want to invest their time to the partner, which means eventually, in their world, they can't have a good relationship, and eventually it will going to affect to the children and etc. So, but in our world, we want to have a healthier relationship, uh, which means we're going to, even though they don't, if they're single or if they date somebody in a very like not young age, or they can still have healthier, which means they can there's a higher chance that they can not break up, but in their world they will going to have an unhealthier relationship, which will cause eventually broke up or other serious issues. And how to propose.
Judge, notice that I think that government is bench is already entirely out of debate. Reason because I think that they basically just treat this debate about whether being single or not is actually good, they actually just completely ignore the fact that we're actually debating on how the parents are advising their children, except for the second argument, which I'll deal with later, right? In this speech, I'm going to first have some reframing and re-stance on our side. Secondly, I'm going to have some rebuttals to their side. Thirdly, I'm going to have my argument about how it actually takes away their own rights and their own autonomy and their own choice, right? Firstly, then, some reframing. What is this debate actually about then? What we think is what's good for the child and what's in you as a parent's like own interest, right? What is this debate not about then, right? Not about the benefits of being in a romantic relationship or not. It's also not about like people not being allowed to like fall in love entirely on their side, right? It is actually about whether parents should actually encourage or advise children to avoid romantic relationships and stay single. This looks like parents influencing and convincing their child to be single and providing a lot of clear reasons why they actually believe that. Secondly, about how you actually scold or like punish your child when they actually want to date someone or falls in love with someone, right? What is the sense on our side then, right? We don't accept their like I don't we don't really accept their like provided stats for ourselves the house because the stats for our side is actually that we think that parents should actually stay neutral about relationships or staying single. We do not accept the proposed stance for us that parents should actually advise people to become in a romantic relationship because the motion does not ask us for that, right? Moving on to rebuttals here, right? Firstly, they tell us that, oh, people are going to spend too much time and money and effort on things like romantic relationships. I think this is really unrelated. We don't because I don't think this debate is actually about whether being single is good or not. But secondly, I think that I want to ask them a question, right? Why do people actually fall in love with each other, right? This is because you inherently just love them. You, for example, you love their personality. You want to like start dating them and like you want to marry them, right? I think at the end of the day, it's not about time and money and effort because even if it is about time and money and effort and you only care about the outcomes, I think that at the end of the day, for example, being a relationship or being a couple and like sharing assets with each other is really like good for your time and money and effort, right? For example, they could also give you like some random support. But I don't think this is but like this is actually related to at the end of the day, right? Okay. Secondly, then we think that how this actually they tell us how it actually pressures single people. I think that this is really I think this is actually very like symmetrical on both sides of the house. This your side is basically pressuring people to go into romantic relationships. And by the way, we're not actually going to pressure single people because I don't think that's actually what the motion's about, right? Moving on to my argument then. My argument here is why like parents raising their child to become like single actually takes away their own autonomy and their own choice, right? Two parts to this argument. First part on how raising the child to become single is a very powerful thing, and second part about how the about like the link to how this arose at the autonomy at the end of the day, right? First part then, why do you think that raising a child to become single is a very powerful and actually to completely takes away your choice, right? Firstly, then, as a child, you probably fall under the control of your parent, right? Your parent scolds you or punishes you when you actually fall in love or start dating or want to like marry someone, right? But secondly, I think that child probably takes everything parent tell you to like as correct, right? As a child, you probably look up to your mom and dad and see them as the ultimate people who tell the only and the truth. And therefore, as a child, you're probably not going to fall in love, or probably not going to, or probably going to try to like stay single, right? But thirdly, even when you grow up and gain your own independence, you're shadowed by your parents' teachings, right? This is because A, you don't want to betray or forget your parents' teachings because you're most likely loving your parents, right? Therefore, unlikely to date in secret or even not in secret when you fall in love. Secondly, then, as a young adult, you probably need some support like financial and emotional support. And that's why you don't want to like erode your relationship and want to keep your parents' teachings because you need a lot of support for your parents, right? If you erode away the relationship because you betrayed them or forgot them, you lack the support from your parents. Therefore, if there wasn't even like such a teaching or such a teaching to become single, I think at the end of the day, like you don't need to have like anything that you worry that you will betray and such you don't will feel like this guilt or shame when you actually quote unquote betray them, right? I mean, even if you eventually come to a consensus with your parents that you are allowed to go into a romantic relationship, you still feel, for example, guilt and your parents and if your parents do truly believe that you should stay single, you still have like some erosion from that relationship, right? Second part about how the link to about the link to this, how this like erodes autonomy and why this autonomy is essentially important at the end of the day, right? Firstly, I think that it should be your own choice for what type and if you have a relationship in the future, right? It should be your own choice because it's your own like mental health, it's your own well-being. And if you think that being in a relationship will help you, I think that it's actually good for you to be in a relationship. And if you think that you should stay single, then sure, be single. We don't really care, right? Secondly, then, I mean, even if you're under your parents' control, your parents shouldn't be like under your parents' control, like as you're a child or even as you're an adult, your parents shouldn't be able to like control everything you have in your life, right? Sometimes teachings can be wrong. Sometimes like they might be flawed or they might be biased to some extent, right? I think that for Lee, parents already have enough control over you, right? They control your education, they control your medical things, they control your future career to some extent. I think that they don't need that much control. Moving on to my impact things, right? Three easy impacts. Firstly, I think that actually like as I already talked to you, it actually erode some like a relationship that even when you don't want to start dating because you will like you'll feel ashamed because for example you might like be in love with someone or you have like a crush on someone, right? And when your parents are firm about being single, you feel angry or tired of this control they have over you. Secondly, I think it's basic right to your own autonomy and independence, both as a child under parents' legal rights, but also as a grown adult. Even if your parents have some right over you, they shouldn't have control over your entire life and if you have like a child in the future or not or if you just like have like a relationship or if you're actually single, right? Thirdly, then, I think it's actually missing out on what might actually be better for you. Some people might say that it's good for them to be in a relationship. Some people might say it's better to be single. In that case, we don't really care about this motion. But at the end of the day, I think that you should have this autonomy to decide what you think is actually better for you. Therefore, for all these reasons, we are the people and we give them the rights. For all these reasons, propose.
So, Judge, before I start my main speech, I would like to do my rebuttal and reframing about our side. So, there are some misunderstandings, I think, from the opposition side. This debate is not about punishing the children to be single. We are preferring the children to be single. And also, adding up to our honorable Prime Minister's speech, we would like to say a note that children doesn't listen to their parents forever. One day, if they get mature and they have their own stance about their thoughts and their points, they'll not listen to their parents or their guardians. So we're not keeping the children single or forcing them to be single forever. We're just letting them and preferring to them to be single until they have they're mature enough to actually think about their own relationships. Okay, now I'd like to move on to our side's third argument. So our third argument is that there is wider relationship with people. So in our world, we believe that preferring to be single will prevent unbiased relationship and let people have a wider view with their friends and their not special relationship, just good relationships. So this is because when one has a special relationship with another, this creates a biased view to only one specific person. So for example, let's say there's a person called David. So David really likes the person. So let's say that there's a fight between David's friends, and there is like a fight between their friends, and the one of the members of the fight is his crush. And when in the opposition side, when they are open to have a crush and they can just like anybody before they're actually mature enough to think about their relationships, David will be very biased and take the side of his crush and not really think about what the matter is. And this will create David into a no, this will highly likely make David be in the side of his crush rather than thinking about the actual matter of the clash. So this will this will make David so this can happen just once, it's okay. But like if this keep happening and if David doesn't learn to think about some clashes in a unbiased view and in a very uh equal view, then this will later in life create David into a very a person who can't really think about points and about clashes, and which we don't want people to be like that. And also, in our world, where we prefer being single and where parents say to their children to be single and preferring them to be single, then we will give David a possibility to actually take an unbiased step and thoughts about those clashes and giving him a high social development and also an unbiased judgment in those fights. So this doesn't only affect David. This our in our world, many people and many citizens will think or act this way, a way of deep thinking socially and in a less biased view. And oh, mm. So to ultimately compare our side and the opposition side, the opposition side is trying to make this debate like a debate where we're forcing children or we're forever forcing them to actually be single or just preferring as like a forceful matter and like pressuring their children to be single. They're trying to frame our side as that, but actually our side is thinking about the actual good and positive matters of being single and not being single forever, but also like having a chance to develop socially and having a being able to think about uh different matters by themselves. Thank you.
As the deputy leader of opposition in my speech, I'll be first giving out some rebuttals to the proposition side, and then I'll give my substantive on how there will be long-term loneliness. Now, moving on to the rebuttals, I'll first extend some rebuttals from the first proposition speaker's case. Now, they talked about how there will be like people forcing to stay in bad relationships because there will be like a because they don't want to be lonely. However, this is not true, right? Because in fact, there will be an opposite reaction because humans naturally want romance, as the first speaker already said. The second when they experience romance as adults, they will get overwhelmed because when they were in their childhood, they were never taught how to deal with relationships and how to spot like the signs that the relationship is toxic. So when they actually get into a relationship when they're in adulthood, they can't recognize the signs that imply them that the relationship is toxic and how they shouldn't actually stay in the relationship. Now, this rebuttal will also be the same for the second speaker's case on how there will when the child grows up, they won't listen to the parents because because even when they grow up, they don't know how to deal with relationships. So this is not the point. So instead, on our side, we present an alternative, which is to teach children when they're young to learn how to deal with these kind of relationships because relationships are a big part of our lives. It's a critical skill to learn how to deal with certain fights or arguments in life. Now, they also talked about how there will be a biased view. Now, Judge, we don't really understand how this works, but I'll just rebut to it as it is. So, first of all, this is non-unique because there are also things in our life, for example, friend groups in school or just generally people around you. And when you know that person, or if he or she is a friend of yours, you'll naturally stand up for them because it is a sign of loyalty, and we believe on our side that that isn't something that is bad. Now, secondly, we believe that this is also an important skill for you to learn in life because um you'll always experience fights and arguments in your life, right? For example, you need to learn how to balance between loyalty and fairness. Sometimes you might need to stand more to your friend's side. Sometimes you might also need to display more fairness. It's like it's a fine line that you need to learn how to balance on in life. Now, they also the first speaker also talked about how this will affect academic performance. Now, just to extend on my first speaker, we actually this is actually not true, right? Because study is stressful. Oftentimes in university there are exams and lots of essays to write, and in reality it's extremely difficult for someone to go through all of that without support. Now, usually people will have friends, right? Now, if you have a romantic partner, that's oftentimes even better because you're more intimate. You're more willing to share that stress with them, and they will support you throughout this academic journey, which will actually make your academic performance even better. Now, secondly, even if the relationship does take up some time from your studying, it's actually good on our side because surviving in our world often always depends on social skills and not always just pure knowledge, because there are things in our things in work such as collaboration and like networking, being a leader. They're all social skills that are a part of EQ, which is emotional quotient, which is very important in our lives. So moving on to my argument on how there will be long-term loneliness. Now, in this argument, we have three mechanisms. The first mechanism will be about how you will be lonely in the first place. So, in the status quo, when you are young, support comes from your parents. You see them as role models. And in your 20s, support mostly comes from friends because you'll probably be studying university and in a boarding school, and therefore you'll have many friends to support you around you. But in the 30s and the 40s, friends will move away because they have had families. They now married someone and they need to care for their children. And because the family, they'll obviously prioritize their own relatives, and therefore you'll be left alone. And when parents raise their child to be single, they don't know how to deal with that loneliness because they've always had only parents in their lives and not any other romantic partners. And when all the support disappears from your parents and your friends, the child gets isolated, which can lead to just overall depression or even sometimes health issues. Second mechanism here is on um how this is not just when you reach adulthood you become lonely. It's also all the way until you get old because um unlike other families who have like children supporting them in old age, they will support them with financially support them or just providing emotional support. When singles won't have that support because their parents will eventually pass away as always, and because they don't have children or romantic partners, they oftentimes don't have as much support as normal families. This will lead to things like long-term health issues, especially if you fall sick. You'll feel an extensive amount of loneliness with nobody beside your hospital bed to support you in your final years of your life. Now, our last mechanism here is a slight extension to my first speaker's case. Now, this is about how this creates a fear of relationships. Now, so now because parents are encouraged to like on their side, because parents are encouraged to like make them have single relationships, oftentimes especially when you get older, parents don't have insight on your personal life, and when they don't have insight on your personal life, when they see you sitting next to someone of opposite gender, or they get suspicious, and when they get suspicious, um they often have like some response to you. Now, over time, the child gets more and more accustomed to this process, which is sit and chat with a friend, then your parents get involved and things go wrong. Now, to avoid the outcome, the child will stop interacting with anyone at all, which is extremely bad, right? Because you wouldn't be able to have friends. And this also leads to a decrease in your social skills, which is important as I talked about in my rebuttals. So for all these reasons, please vote for the opposition. Thank you.
This was a debate about comparing whether single or couple is better than other, not just emphasizing that one of the terms should be banned or one not. Proud to propose. Before moving on to our main clashes and rebuttals, we would like to further frame in our site. We believe that child mentioned in the motion is talking about young children who are immature or may make improper choices, that guardians is necessary and should have a responsibility to control child's rights based on their choices. Moving on to our rebuttals, our first rebuttal to opposing side is moving is what they claim about friends and moving on from their friends. Not all of them is losing their friends. Also, there's an exclusive point which we will further explain in our clash points. However, let me briefly explain this point in our rebuttals. Firstly, there's a two situations. First, where there is a single where he has a freedom of time or relationship between other friends or other same genders because it is the most necessary and most exclusive part where they go to school because they, as mentioned in our in my further frame, which this children mentioned in this motion is young children's which go to schools. And the second situation is where one of the child have a girlfriend or slash boyfriend, and they go to some points and they just spend their time only themselves, and the one of the child which we're talking about in this situation is lacking a time between all the various friends, which is about religion, race, or whatnot, yeah, and
POI.
no. Firstly. Uh, Before moving on, our second response to the opposing side is that their mechanism about friends are too much exaggerated and lacking proof because, as mentioned in our first rebuttals, it couldn't be, it could the mechanism they talked about in their points in their third argument is not supporting any of their previous arguments and just make a clash point between what our side talked about and debating about that. So we believe that that is too much exaggerated because friends will completely move on, but it won't be happening.
POI.
No. Uh, Moving on to our two main clashes, which our first clash is about whether parents should take control of children's choices. Government Government claim that parents would like to give better future to child, and opposition claim that restricting children's freedom from parents is not necessary. However, in the clash of these two arguments, our side is better and winning this point because children should be able to have a fair chance. However, because they're very young, and as mentioned before, because they're very immature and they have a huge possibility of making improper choices because that's why we have our parents, we have our guardians and whatnot. We believe that
POI.
even though they need fair chances of I'll take it later. Even though they need a fair chance of talking or sharing their choices, we believe that if it is not necessary and if the parents think it is not proper for their age groups or whatnot, we believe that parents should have a responsibility to restrict and have a right to restrict children's choices at the end of the day, and it is inalienable because as mentioned before. Our second clash is about uh, friends that was mentioned before in our rebuttals and third argument of opposing sides. In our side, we believe that need to be single to learn social skills. And opposition need to be single to learn social skills and have lots of relationship between friends or whatnot. And opposition claim that they should learn social skill during relationship with their girl slash boyfriends or whatnot. However, let's say there's one more time. Let's say there are two situations where in our government side we claim that while being a single they meet friends because of that without wasting time with their girlfriend slash boyfriend and without just talking with them because that's a normal mechanism that happens when we become a couple or whatnot. And while meeting go and opposition side will be while meeting girlfriend slash boyfriend, they will have a friendly relationship between their friends. And we believe that they claim that friends will move away. As mentioned in our rebuttals, or at least we have in singles because we have a major question about is one relationship between their girl slash boyfriend better or more relationship between various people in the society better. We believe that obviously relationship between various people in the society is way better. This is because friends will move away and at least if we become so generous that their side's mechanism is obviously right, that friends will eventually move away. However, let's say if there's a situation where they have a couple relationship. However, because they have a couple relationship for a long time, they won't have lots of chances for having a various people in the society as at the end of the day compared to our size children, which is very which is single, which will have lots of opportunity at the end of the day. And therefore, at least we have in singles, we have lots of opportunities to meet various people. At the end of the day, we believe that the motion stands for us. Thank you.
Yeah. Panel, the ultimate goal of parenting is not to write our children's futures for them. It is to give them the pen. So when a parent raises a child to prefer a specific lifestyle, especially one as deeply personal as their romantic future, then they aren't guiding them as like government tries to tell us. They're programming them. So the government today wants to build a shield around the children, but in doing so, they're actually building a cage. Thus, we oppose. So today, the opposition will prove why this motion is fundamentally harmful. So to be absolutely clear, the opposition here is not to ban or like demonize either lifestyle, but we are here to defend a child's right to choose between them without parental conditioning. So a quick roadmap. So first of all, I'll talk about the burden and proof of both sides. Second of all, three main clashes in the debate, and third of all, weighing if I have time. So before I dive into like burden of proof, I need to offer a critical clarification for the very nature of the motion, which the government side seems to have fundamentally misunderstood. So they argue that the motion doesn't really matter because children won't listen to their parents forever and will eventually just do what they want. So panel, that is a massive concession on their own burden of proof. So when the motion says this house would raise their child to prefer being single, it assumes a fiat of effort and intent. So this debate is about whether it is moral and effective to attempt this conditioning. And by arguing that children will just ignore their parents anyway, the government is essentially admitting that their own policy is a complete, futile, ineffective, and practically useless. So they cannot defend a policy by arguing it simply won't work in the long run. Now, moving on to burden of proof. So on proposition, they must prove all of the following. So a parent should actively like manipulate or tilt a child's internal desires toward one specific lifestyle rather than just like teaching
Go
them
on.
no, thank you. That being single is an acceptable option. B, the preference for being single is universally healthier for a child's psychological development than being open to relationships regardless of the child's like natural personality or future identity. C, a parent has a moral right to predetermine the child's capacity for romantic intimacy before the child is old enough to experience it for themselves. And on
Go
call, we have
on.
no, thank you.
we have a slightly lighter burden. So, we only need to prove that a parent should remain a neutral guide, supporting that the child's self-reliance while leaving the door completely open to whatever lifestyle brings them fulfillment. And B, we only need to prove that teaching a child basic self-worth and resilience is completely sufficient to protect them from bad relationships. I'll take the POI.
We believe that opposition side have a huge misunderstanding of saying that in our side we're talking about parents are manipulating. However, we believe that if necessary, parents have a responsibility to restrict children's choices, which they address on proper choices.
Okay, so to answer your POI, so first of all, you talked about how we are misunderstanding your side and that parents have responsibility, but we completely understand parents' responsibility panel. So a parent's responsibility is to give their child the tools to navigate life, right? Such as financial literacy, resilience, and self-worth. But a parent's responsibility is not to dictate their child's internal identity or predetermine their capacity for love. So the moment a parent tries to mandate an internal preference for isolation, they're no longer fulfilling a responsibility because they're simply overstepping a boundary and infringing on their child's fundamental autonomy. Now, moving on to the clashes. So the first clash is about which side truly protects the child's autonomy. So what did they tell you, Judge? So they talk about how their motto is the ultimate defense of a child's independence because society completely constantly pressures young people into traditional relationships, and parents must act as a counterweight. So by actively raising a child to prefer to be single, they believe that they insulate that child from external expectations. So why we as the opposition win this clash? 3 layers of mechanisms here. So first of all, the coercion mechanism. So the government does not eliminate pressure; they merely replace societal pressure with parental coercion, right? So by teaching a child a substantial preference for their romantic future as an intrusive intervention into their internal identity. So by doing this, parents dictate the structure of their child's life rather than letting themselves write it. And second about the developmental mechanism. So romantic and emotional desires are deeply rooted, natural aspects of a human's identity that evolve during adolescence. So parents cannot predict a child's future identity. And third about the ultimate impact. So the opposition is the only side here that genuinely respects autonomy. We teach children self-sufficiency as a skill, but leave the door open for them to choose their own lifestyle. Now, moving on to the second clash, so which role creates healthier emotional outcomes? So what do they tell you? The pro tries to argue that a child raised to prefer being single is entirely spared from the psychological harms of modern dating, such as a relationship anxiety or losing their identity in a partner. And they claim that normalizing singleness from infancy ensures that child grows up with self-reliant emotional cores. But we do not get their point. We win this clash because Gov model creates this toxic psychological reality proven by 3 layers of impact here. So first of all, raising a child to prefer being single requires teaching them to view deep romantic vulnerability as a threat or as a weakness. So this breeds a harmful form of hyper interdependence where children they learn to emotionally guard themselves and shut the world outside. And second of all, if the child grows up and naturally experiences a biological desire for a partner, they will face intense cognitive dissonance because of their heavy conditioning. They will view their natural desire for love as a failure of their upbringing, causing deep internal shame. And what is our impact here? So human beings are fundamentally interdependent. While friendships are vital, they naturally shift as people age and build their own lives. So by conditioning a child to reject a life partner, the government's dooms them to systemic long-term loneliness. And clash 3 is on how we best how do we best shield children from danger. So the government's final defense is harm reduction, right? They argue that dating world is full of toxic, abusive relationships that people enter out of the desperate fear of being alone, and thus they claim that making a child prefer the single state immune, and makes them immune from domestic toxicity. So why we win this clash? So first of all, you do not need to weaponize isolation or force a rigid preference onto a child to protect them from bad partners. An opposition parent achieved the exact same protection simply teaching high self-esteem and strict boundaries. And second of all, a child raised with self-worth knows that they're whole on their own, meaning that they would naturally reject toxic relationships. However, unlike the government child, our child retains the emotional flexibility to accept a healthy, loving relationship if it comes along. And thus, Judge, I would strongly like to urge for a op ballot. Thank you.
Imagine that you have a crush on this classmate, but your mother and your father tells you to stay away from that classmate instead of actually pursuing with who you want to be with, even if the end of the day you break up. I think that at the end of the day, on their side of the house, your parents disagree, not allowing you to share, for example, memorable experiences like dates with that person, even when that person loves you back. You feel emotionally drained, that you would do anything for that person. Meanwhile, you and your parents slowly become less close to you. This is Gov Road, and therefore so proud to oppose. Three things on why their side already loses this debate then. Firstly, I think that the biggest thing is that they basically misunderstand emotion. This is not a this house believes that romantic relationships are is better than being single. This is what their side is telling us, right? Clearly in your whip. This is basically what they tell us in your I mean in their second speaker. I think also we're not banning one relationship or the other. We're telling you why this advice practically takes away the choice unless you hate your parents and want to go to that extent where your relationship completely like erodes away, right? I also think that even if they somehow got the motion correct, which I don't think is true, I think it's basically contradictory to your own stance because if you say that because if you say that it's gonna like it's like believing like which one is better, I think at the end of the day I think that at the end of the day, if you say that, oh, you're allowed to, if you're not like, if you still have the choice, then that their like model or their like framing completely doesn't stand, right? But secondly, then I think they basically ignored our arguments, right? I don't really think they understand it our mechs. They just gave us like really, really shallow like rebuttals. For example, oh, these people aren't bad on um these people aren't banned on like having relationships, which is basically what they said in their second speech, right? I think at the end of the day, we care about how these people actually have their own autonomy, right? We don't care, like, their side of the house just banning and everything, right? Thirdly, then, I think that they have really, really symmetric arguments, as already explained in our speech. Moving on to like a general overview and some weighing off the debate, right? What did Prop tell us firstly, right? They tell us that firstly, people are going to be biased to their crush, as we already told you. I think that A, you should deal with your own drama because that is a very important critical skill. But secondly, I think the balance between your crush and your friends is very key. Secondly, then, they tell us about how there's going to be you're going to waste time, money, and effort, as already explained in our first speech. I don't really think that cares because you don't go into a romantic relationship because of these things. What did we tell you, Ren, right? Firstly, we tell you that there's going to be long-term loneliness. Secondly, we tell you that there's going to be like infringement of of people's rights on their side of the house, and we actually give people autonomy, right? Moving on to the weighing here, I think that two weighing metrics here. Firstly, I think that we actually win on principle, right? I think that autonomy is how we actually allow people to do anything to themselves, even if it's bad to themselves to some extent, right? We don't actually care about how you spend your time, money, and effort, as long as you're spending this time yourself and you're not actually like people are not stealing time away from you, right? I mean, relating this to emotion, right? Parents should give children some sort of autonomy to their own, or some sort of autonomy, even at like a lot of autonomy, even in the future after they become like independent, right? Secondly, then I think that we essentially win on time frame on this at the end of the day because we tell you that there's going to be long-term loneliness and long-term like erosion of the relationship between your parents and yourself compared to their side of the house where like money and effort you could actually just easily regain that back, right? Also, um also their argument about people being biased to your crush, I think that that is a short-term argument because you could easily rebuild these relationships because they're easily from your friend. You could just sort everything out, right, and talk everything
So,
out. For all these reasons, so proud to oppose.
2-1. Judge, opposition says our policy will not work because parents will tell children to don't date and children will simply ignore it. But this misunderstands our stances completely. We are not saying parents control behavior, we are saying parents guide preference, which means this is a big difference between you're not allowed to date and you don't need to date to be valuable. So in our world, children are not being restricted, they are being navigated. They still date if they want to, but their baseline mindset is healthier and less dependent on relationship for self-worth. So the claim that children will just ignore parents is uh, we believe that it's a misunderstanding because we are not enforcing their behavior, we're shaping their attitude. So, Judge, I will briefly explain three things: what government has proven, our burden of proof, and why opposition fails to prove their case, and then compare to the true worlds. What we have proven is that we have proven a clear causal mechanism. When children are raised to believe that being single is a valid and normal default, we remove that the idea relationship status equals self-worth. And that matters because once that pressure is gone, children are able to build a self-esteem independently instead of relying on romantic validations. For that, we prove a clear outcome that they make better choices in relationship because they enter them out of genuine their preferences and not fear or social pressures. So what we prove is simple. Removing pressure improves autonomy, and autonomy improves relationship quality. So what opposition fails to prove their case is that opposition never actually proves their main claim. They mentioned about neutral parenting, but they never prove neutrality is real. Parents, we believe that parents should always shape values whether they like it or not, because parents are the one who should uh guide their children, which means if they are staying in neutrality, and especially uh for concept of dating, it should be obvious and clear, which means you should guide them how to date, or you should tell the basic like information that they have, so that they uh, children can also have a healthier relationships. So they also say relationships are important for skills like communication and empathy, but they fail to prove why you need pressure or you need pressure or social expectations to learn those skills. As at best, they show relationships are good, they only talked about relations are goods, but they completely failed to prove the key point of this debate: why society should pressure children into thinking relationships are necessary for a successful life. So let's compare the two worlds, government and oppositions. In the government world, children grow up emotionally secure. They know being single is not a failure, so that they don't rush into the relationships out of insecurity. When they do enter relationships, they are healthier, more stable, and based on real compatibility. In an opposition world, children grow up with constant social pressure that uh, they must date to be complete. That creates anxiety comparison, because when society continuously pressure them to date somebody, they might have a people they might meet some people who they really don't like, which means it's going to create, in their worlds they're going to create a relationship that is really unhealthy, because eventually if you don't like these people and if you're dating this seems like their world uh it is an obligation to date somebody, not uh
Bye.